Let's welcome our guest. He is the DA's new leader, Mmusi Maimane. Mr. Maimane, welcome and thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, John. It's a great privilege to be here, and it's great to be with Abomkhaya back home in Johannesburg. I just flew in from Port Elizabeth, so it's nice to be home.
Sounds like you're losing your voice.
And it's not from any wild parties or anything like that. It's just really been a busy weekend and a long campaign, but I'm glad in many ways that that's come to an end. We can get on with the business of working.
Well, let's talk about the business of working. I've got your first speech as leader in front of me, your acceptance speech, victory speech, whatever you call it, and I want to read this bit for Mkhaya and get people to think about what you said, but firstly get you to say what you meant. You talked about the apartheid system and you say these experiences shaped me, just like they shaped so many young black people of my generation. And that is why I simply can't agree with those who say they don't see color. Because if you don't see that I'm black, then you don't see me. What were you trying to say?
It's an important thing, John. The apartheid divided South Africans on the basis of race. It said that black people were inferior. It also communicated that give black people miseducation. It was a dreadful education system. It was dehumanizing. And that has been part of my experience. It shaped me. It also means that the color of my skin, when others saw it as an instrument of oppression, is something that informs my story. And in fact, one of the ways when I crafted that line, I'd been traveling with a friend of mine,
yes,
who is white, and we went to the Hector Peterson Memorial. And when we got there, he began to see the history of 76 and see what South Africans had been through, particularly black South Africans. And right there and then, the penny dropped for him. He said to me, look, I can see a context. I can see where you've come from. And that's, I think, is important for South Africans to acknowledge our past in order that we can build a better future together.
So I want to go further into the speech. 2 paragraphs down. They're short paragraphs, but here's the next bit that struck me. We can transcend race, but this can only happen if every South African acknowledges the injustices of apartheid, and it can only happen if we all recognize that the racial inequality of the past remains with us today. And I want to ask you this. Were you talking to your own party there in perhaps stronger language than they're accustomed to hearing on this issue? Were you talking, in fact, not just to the nation, but maybe quite specifically to the DA?
Absolutely. I wanted us to be clear that race is still a very important distinguisher in South Africa. It's still a proxy for disadvantage, even though race and disadvantage are not the same, but the proxy still exists. And in fact, we shouldn't just as a DA be angered, and as I say later in the speech, that we can't just be angered about constitutional challenges. Those things are important, but we must also be angry about that injustice. We must recognize the fact that it's still today, black children's education is still very inferior. It's still today that so many black South Africans are left out of the economy. And I believe that there are South Africans, regardless of race, who understand this problem, who identify with it and say, we want to do everything that we can to build a society that transcends race, so that one day my kids, like your kids, will grow up in a place where they can know that the color of their skin is only as relevant as the shape of their nose, as one might say.
From Midrand, Muhera, hi.
Hi, John, and to Mr. Maimane.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Congratulations to you, Mr. Maimane.
Thank you very much.
However, one concern that I don't think that's the case. I know that Helen Zille stepped down as a leader, and I don't believe, and I don't believe that this what we see happening to DA, it is just a window dressing. He wanted to put someone that can be able to control from outside. And if really this is a real transformation, we'll begin to see by the action that we put in that party. Thank you very much.
So, Mohera, just because I'm asking people questions as well as taking yours, you say you'd be able to judge whether Mmusi Maimane really does have his hands on the steering wheel by the actions he takes. What action do you think he should take? I mean, what change would you like to see so that, because you're asking him a question, you're saying, I'm going to judge you by these standards, but you don't tell him what the standards are. Share something with us if you can.
John, originally DA was guided as a white party.
Yes.
And people that are behind DA, we all know they were white.
Yes.
Now, this is more of a transformation that is taking place in that party.
Okay.
There are a lot of policies that have to be changed within the DA, I believe, if really they are there for a transformation. And we are watching with a critical eye if those developments will begin to see them. Because in a lot of people's mind in this country, DA, it is still a white party.
Okay. Mohera, thanks. I mean, Mmusi Maimane, your response to that?
Look, I think there's a twofold problem to the statement that the previous caller just made. The one is, I tend to agree with him. I think many people don't know our policies, and so they believe the propaganda that gets spun around them. I think the second exercise is that we haven't been as explicit about our economic growth policy as we should have been. We haven't been forthcoming about many of the policy stance that we've taken, because I think sometimes in the political landscape things get drowned out by sometimes some of the distraction that takes place. The job that I've got to do now is I want to reaffirm the most important principle here is that I'm not in the business of building a party for black people. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be in the business of building a party for white people. I want to be in the business of building a party for all South Africans who share values. So just like I wouldn't want somebody who says, look, the DA must come in here and just simply be a party for white people and whatever, and almost the historical injustice of saying it's a balancing act between the fears of the minority versus the aspirations of the majority. That's not the exercise that we've got to be engaged with. The exercise that we've got to be engaged with is about a vision for South Africa. It's about an inclusive economy, and it's about when people can sit down and say, we share those values. And let me give you an example. Many people have said, we want a society that is fair. And we've articulated that vision of fairness. And what we're saying is that, look, it's unfair that a child who's still in the Eastern Cape studies underneath a tree or doesn't have a toilet. That's not a race issue. That's a fairness issue.
Yes.
And I think black people, white people, Indian people, colored people can collectively come together and say, we see this project and we want to fight against that injustice. So I think if we can be articulate about our value space, about a vision that is collective and inclusive, I really believe there'll be many South Africans from all walks of life we see the reconciled South Africa, we see a non-racial South Africa. We can come together and build this party going forward.
So Tabo on Twitter asks, Mmusi Maimane has accepted that whites have benefited from apartheid. How does he convince them to repair the damage they benefited from?
It's always going to be a difficulty. I mean, our historical injustices favored the one at the expense of the other. There's a significant question about how do we come on board and really put forward an economic policy that says to white South Africans and black South Africans, we can come together and build a prosperous nation. And I think if we really articulate about how do we do triple B, double E, opened up opportunities for more people, we can be more inclusive in that exercise. And certainly, I think for most business people, particularly white business people, they want a triple B, double E that works, that benefits the majority, that allows us to work harder at correcting a historical injustice.
How do you know that? Because it wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility that many white business people would want a BE arrangement that would allow them to comply as quickly, cheaply as possible. I mean, on what basis do you say that they really have the deeper transformation that you're describing at heart? Surely you can't be certain of that.
Well, we can't take anything for granted, but the fact of the matter is that South Africans, we've failed to be able to articulate a vision that is inclusive. We've failed to invite many people to the journey. And I think for South African business, they feel this policy inconsistency that the ANC has put on the table, and they feel uncertain about it. What I want us to achieve is to say, let's talk about growth, let's talk about consistency, let's ensure that when we talk about a long-term plan for South Africa, it is inclusive of everybody, it allows people to grow, because ultimately, we've got to open up opportunities for more people. And I think really the issue here is about vision, and the issue here is about policy certainty and making sure that people know that they can predict. We've seen it in the city of Cape Town. When you say to people that, we certainly 70% of the business in the city of Cape Town is put forward to black businesses. And people are comfortable with that because they can see that it's applied fairly, the rules are important, and it grows the economy. So I think you've got to be able to do your part as government and don't get involved in things that you certainly can't control.
086 0000 959 from Vosloorus. Mpo, good evening, Mpo.
Good evening, Dr. John. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Mpo?
I'm all right. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Maimane there. I love what you just said. He's building a party for the nation, not just for white or black people. It's not relevant anymore if you look at it, because we are one. It's just that we have the stubbornness of acting like white people and black people, who we know that the vision is we must be one. All I want to say to him is that I wish to see him a campaigning for Madibeng local municipality, especially in Brest, where we see that there is a contribution of tax happening there. There's a bigger chunk of tax that is coming out of Bapung.
and the mining industry there, but there's nothing happening. I've seen what DA is doing in other local municipalities. They're doing a great job.
Paul, thanks. Calling from Vosloorus, from Bryanston.
I think, John, if you don't mind, I think that's a very important point that Mpo's just made there, because it puts forward politics that say we can contest for ideas and ideals. And actually, the only way you can get to that is to see change, that you can judge one government and focus on another. And I think here again is a great chance that we can really show South Africans that this project of a reconciled South Africa is not dead, it's still alive. You know?
Yeah, I want to pick up on a point that you highlighted as we were chatting further down in your speech. You talk about unemployment, you say it stands at 36%. You talk about some of the economic problems. You refer to your cousin, 66% of young people out of work. And then this is the sentence, or the pair of sentences, that caught my eye. Democrats, we simply cannot go on like this. As a party, we are quick to get angry about the sustained attack on our constitution and our institutions, but we must be equally angry at the insider-outsider economic policies that have trapped too many of our people in poverty for far too long. Are you in effect saying that the DA has missed a trick there, not just in the policies it's articulated, but perhaps in an absence of empathy for the poor in the way it talks about poverty? In other words, is it more than just content? Has there been a tone gap that perhaps you are setting yourself the task of fixing?
I think one of the most important moments that we had under Helen Zille, certainly as long as I can remember, is one when we marched to Luthuli House on the Real Jobs March. That march was symbolic in that people said, how do you want to put your lives in front of an ANC that wants to attack you? Why is that so important? But it was symbolic in tone in that it said, we're willing to march for real jobs. In the same light, I want this party to say we'd be willing to do anything for the education of children in Limpopo. We'd be equally willing to do anything for the inequality that exists and persists. So
would you increase company tax?
Increase in company tax? Well, I don't think that helps the macroeconomic climate.
You see, because that's what Bongani is saying on Twitter. He's saying redistribution of the wealth, mostly in white hands, is Mmusi Maimane's greatest hill to climb to convince certain voters. Doesn't that in essence sum up the gap that you're trying to straddle, that you are the proponent of an economic policy that doesn't really want to squeeze the rich that tight, and this mass of voters out there who could be yours are saying, well, until I see you doing that, I'm not sure that you're committed to what you say.
I think there, once again, it's a commitment to a process. Once you start to increase company tax, you are also then equally, you're going to impact everybody across the board. That's not you don't tax your way to wealth. That's the fact. I think Winston Churchill said it best. We've got to find policies that grow our economy, that open up more opportunities. It's not about one of the last 21 years, and I think people must take note of this. The last 21 years has been in many ways about saying, let's cut down what we already have and divvy it up. And that's an important process, but it's been certainly not a conclusive process. The conclusive part is about saying, when you look at BBBEE, do an exercise on ownership, but furthermore, focus on how you do procurement. How do you stimulate small businesses? What are the educational incentives that say to a company, if it's an engineering firm that stands up and says, we want to take 10 black engineers and put them through university, why can't they do that and earn points while they're doing that? So there are other initiatives that we can put in place that grow the pie, not just reduce it. And I think the last 21 years have been about contraction and making our economy a lot smaller and a lot less attractive to more people. So I think we've got to rethink this issue. We've got to look at it and say, how do we do growth that addresses redress? Hi, France.
Good, John. John, two things I just want to say, and then these are around transformation. As someone who works in corporate South Africa, I've noticed how fronting is frustrating transformation in South Africa. And then I want to ask a question to Mmusi. How does he see transformation happening? And I'll explain to me what transformation is at the end of the day. Transformation to me at the end of the day is, by the end of all this, or as what we strive towards, is that the demographics of the country must be represented in the economy. As in the economy must say 80% of blacks, 80% of the economy needs to be going towards it. I just want to understand from Mmusi exactly what is his interpretation of transformation and how he sees it happening.
Thanks, France. I'll give him a chance on that in a second. I just want to take one more call and then we'll hand it over to our guest, Mandla, calling from Zola. Hi, Mandla.
How are you, John?
Fine, and you?
Fine, John. Two things also I wanted to say. That guy almost wanted to took all what I wanted to say. But what I want to say to me that, according to me, the appointment of Mmusi Maimane to me is questionable. Judging the history of Mmusi Maimane in politics, Mmusi Maimane does not have a background of being a politician. So out of
what does that mean? What does having a background of a politician mean?
No, it means we don't know Mmusi Maimane as an activist.
Okay.
So he's coming out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden he becomes one leader person. So that one it shows clearly that no, this is a what you call, it's a window dressing at its best.
So what you're saying in effect, Mandla, is that nobody under 30 can be in politics, really, because the days of activism against apartheid will eventually pass. It will just be people, like me, who are older. I mean, is that what you're saying? You've got to be a certain age.
No, what I'm saying is Mmusi Maimane doesn't understand on how white people operate in this country.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So yeah, the problem is he won't understand. Actually, he will be playing a role of being a window dressing, like what is happening in what you call in corporate. From what in corporate is also what is happening in DA.
Okay, Mandla, thanks. Okay, so two questions. France wants to know your measures and benchmarks of genuine, true economic transformation. What are those?
Look, I mean, I could say to France, why can't it be 100%? Mm-hmm. Why can't we get to a stage? It's the same issue. When you apply quotas, of that level of demographic representation, you end up actually disadvantaging the very people you're trying to advantage. The fundamental issue of transformation is that it cannot just be linear. We can't sit down and say, how do we talk about transformation in the corporate sector? I want to make sure that when we talk, what if we sat down and we said we have a target of building 1,000 entrepreneurs in a particular community, and I would hope that the majority of those are black. I want them to be fully transformed. I want an economic transformation that allows procurement to say black businesses must be able to benefit. I think that's an objective of saying we grow the economy, but we allow that the exercise of small businesses being able to thrive in other communities is a key issue. So that ultimately the demographics and the systems allow effect that there are entrepreneurs being developed, you achieve the exercise of growth, you achieve the exercise of business practice, and you make sure that those businesses are black. So I think that's a very important exercise. But if we just become linear about it and just leave it in that space, we ignore other issues.
But you have to have benchmarks. You've got to have numbers, and in the end, the numbers will, to some degree, be racially defined and driven. I mean,
I don't necessarily believe so. I think we can spend our numbers in saying how many more entrepreneurs we want to see. That's a different question. It's about adding more into the economy and enlarging it much more, rather than simply saying how do you divide what currently is in place, which I think is a challenge that the caller is making. The second challenge that the caller is making is actually the difficulty about fronting. Let me just say, I deplore fronting. Yes. I think it's a crime. I think it's an insult to black people that you simply can put a black person in front and simply say, look, we'll be able to just show you off as a face, but actually the real work is done somewhere else. I deplore it because it is an insult. It also insults in this manner. It says to somebody that black people can't think. They're only available to simply be front and elsewhere. And where there are corporates that are doing that sort of practice, I think we must discourage it. I think we must find ways, because it's another form of corruption, really, and it doesn't achieve the exercise that we wanted to achieve. My work that I've got to do is to say we've got to restore the confidence in ourselves as black people. Yes. I don't stand here I stand as a leader of the DA who is black. And I think it's important that we see the work that I've got to come in and lead the organization. I certainly want to take it in a direction that I want to bring forward. It's not a question of just simply saying, look, it's a fronting exercise. We're building a diverse leadership. Would you say Patricia de Lille as mayor of Cape Town, is she fronting in that space? Or any other leader, Patricia Kopane, and there are many others who are coming into the DA. It can't be so.
So Mandla is saying that's exactly what they've done with you. That you're window dressing, that you were never an activist, he never saw you on the streets fighting over prepaid water meters, etc.
It's deeply offensive, because what he's arguing is that the only political leadership we can have in this country is one born out of people who say we've been in the streets. He doesn't know my political history. I grew up in Soweto and Dobsonville. I understand what riots look like. I've been in the front of protests, so I understand where that issue comes from. But that's not the only criteria you can bring towards leadership. I also come from business. I also come from an NGO sector that understands the fact that society is multifaceted. And I would hope, to be honest with you, Mandla, that I don't make a brilliant politician in that sense, because I'm not here to build a political career. I would hope really in the true activism of the sense is that I can stand up in Parliament and speak about the lives of those young people and fight for the just cause of South Africa. And I hope that's the legacy or the life that I live from, that I've always wanted to live. I've never been interested in any position or interested in a career in politics. Certainly from a career point of view, it's not the best career you can choose. It takes you away from home far too often. But the facts on the table are that what is the cause that we're willing to fight, and will we one day sit down and say we've advanced the cause of South Africans and we've moved the mission of freedom in another generation.
For someone who has no interest in a career in politics and has never sought positions sure come looking for you. DA spokesperson, premier candidate, leader of the House in Parliament, leader of the DA. Isn't this a false modesty on your part? Because surely there's nothing wrong with saying, I would like to be president one day. I think I'd be good at it.
No, there's nothing wrong about that. But
yes,
I think we must dare never forget that the pursuit simply of just positions without the influence or without the societal change and impact is irrelevant. Because if one day I sit back and I said I became president of the Republic and actually did nothing about it, it would create a situation in this country where ultimately you've just achieved the position but you haven't advanced society. The question that we should always be answering is, even we judge any president.
Yes.
I think it was Martin Luther King's daughter who said freedom is never completely won. It is fought for in every generation.
Yes.
Therefore, the question is, are you willing to fight for it? What are you fighting for? Who is your generation that you are working with? My generation says young people are unemployed, and I want to make sure that that is the cause that we fight in every circumstance, and that's the mission that I will be an activist for as long as I live, president or not, leader of the DA or not. I'll always fight for that cause.
086 00 00 959. Moses calling from the Joburg CBD. Hi, Moses.
Hi, Mr. John. How's it?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm on the street. I want some blood and club because I'm waiting for the metro bus. Hey, Mr. Maimane, how's it?
How's it, Baba? How are you doing? Good luck with the metro bus.
I hope the bus is late.
It's really late, so even if it comes, don't cut me. I'll really appreciate if you can just pack my call and then take another one. I wanted to understand, Mmusi, let's say, for instance, you were to take a very unbiased or a very big decision to recall Helen as a premier and you becoming a premier currently of Western Cape. Would you do that? And I want also to understand something, Mr. Mamanguri. Are you still going to continue being a leader in the Parliament of DA, or you have some future plans maybe of becoming a president? I think John did touch on what I wanted to ask.
Okay, Moses, thanks. The bus not there yet, but the line not exactly brilliant. Solly's in Leondale. Hi, Solly.
Hi, John, and hi to your guest. Let's start by congratulating Mmusi for being appointed for the position.
Okay.
John, what is concerning to me is the relationship of political parties in our country. They treat each other as enemies instead of rivals. For an example, I was listening to the radio for almost the whole day today, hoping that maybe I will hear that they say the ANC or the EFF, except Holomisa, that they have congratulated Mmusi, but I haven't heard anything of that sort. And then on the other hand, people like Mmusi and other opposition parties, I expect that whenever maybe the minister passes on, they will attend maybe the funeral, because of the minister is not the minister of the ANC, but is the minister of the country, including of the opposition parties. So it is concerning to me.
Yep, thank you. Okay, Solly, we'll get a response to that. Would you recall Helen Zille as premier, and are you going to stay on as leader of the House?
Firstly, as parliamentary leader, it's a great opportunity to be able to merge both jobs now. So
Yes.
I'll be able to do that. On the second issue, and I think that's a very important principle I want to demonstrate about our party, is that our party always separates party and state.
Yes.
Helen Zille was elected by the people of the Western Cape to be their premier. It's not for our party. And there's a constitutional arrangement that says, actually, the Western Cape legislature elected her as premier. It wasn't the DA, it was that entire legislature that elected her to do that job. So ultimately, we must never tell the people of the Western Cape that, in fact, yes, you must vote for Helen as your premier,
Yes.
but when we feel like it, we can change her. We have to ensure that, and she's doing a fantastic job, she's leading the troops there. I'll remain in Parliament and lead the troops from there and lead other legislatures as we build the party in opposition.
I thought Solly's question was an interesting one because he was talking more generally about the tone and the nature of the relationship between different political parties. But I think in asking that, he raised another question which I'd like you to give your view on. And that is, there has been a view expressed that the DA has too much defined itself in the public mind by what it doesn't like about the ANC, and in particular what it doesn't like about the current president of the country. And I wonder if that's part of the introspection that you're going to be drawing party leadership and membership into, and saying, you know what, actually, because I sense this in your the quote I just read, the sustained attack on our constitution and our institutions, but excuse me, what are we doing about bread and butter? But I think I've said the question. What's your answer?
Sure. I mean, I think what the caller also, I know it's just only language, but I want to clarify, it's not an appointment. I was not appointed. The people of the DA voted and elected
Yes.
me, and I think it's important to distinguish that. I think, and he also made the point about, in whatever, you can ask any of the ANC leaders. In fact, even in Parliament, I SMS'd all the leaders of the ANC and said we could change the parliamentary program at the passing of Minister Collins Chabane, because ultimately we all share common humanity. The relationship between political parties is one that's interesting, and I think,
Yes.
as I sit here today, I certainly have tried to reach out to as many other leaders as possible. We may differ in issues, but ultimately all of us must be driven by a passion for South Africa, and when that becomes disingenuous, we must challenge that at best. I think we've all got different ideas as to where this country has to go. I work with the opposition parties as leader of the opposition, and certainly been part of coordinating efforts where we agree that we stand together on those,
Yes.
on that. And in looking forward, I think what the caller is saying is that we must be distinct about how do we differentiate ourselves and yet ultimately become patriots of South Africa. I want to say, I think one of the things that you will read in the speech in its entirety is that I was deliberate about saying our mention of the ANC must become less and less. Spoke
Yes.
a lot about our values, spoke a lot about what we're going to do. And in a couple of weeks' time, when I launch the vision for South Africa that we want to put forward, it will be something that says, ANC or no ANC, here's the South Africa we want to build, and here's the dream for South Africa that we hold.